Hey guys, and welcome back to the FFP. It's time for part 2 of our Week 7 start sit. First things first, I got to say my apologies that we are late on this video, recording this currently, kind of around dinner time on a Friday, so I know I'm super far behind schedule, but we've got, I guess, good reason for that. It's a sad reason, but as many of you know, Rob is a pastor. We have had 3 people pass away in the last week at our church. Things have been pretty much pure chaos right now, so we're just getting by one step at a time. But huge thank you to 2 people. One, Connor, thank you so much for stepping in and doing some of that research. I really appreciate your help in us getting these videos out and being able to do these start sits. It goes a long way, and having a third person, it really means a lot to me. It's a lot more encouraging to do this work. And secondly, David Fennell, still doing the timestamps for us. Really appreciate it. Makes a big difference. Like I said, just cuts off that extra couple minutes at the end of my workday of taking care of this stuff that I don't have to worry about. So it does mean a lot. We'll just have to connect with you on Facebook or something so you can get us your address and we'll be able to send you that t-shirt. But anyways, nothing else to say there. Let's just get right into our games and start talking about some football. All right, getting into our first game, let's talk about the Lions at the Rams. This should be kind of a fun homecoming match. Of course, it will be at the Rams Stadium, but Stafford's still going to be playing his old team, and I'm kind of excited to watch that. I'm thinking it's going to be a pretty Rams-heavy affair, so let's start and talk about their offense and the fantasy value there. First guy, Matthew Stafford, right off the bat. I mean, how do you not talk about him? He's a must start. In 3 games this year, he has either 3 or 4 touchdowns and 320 or more passing yards. This guy is a 50% chance to hit you the bonus in yards, to hit a home run in the touchdowns department. Now, not every game for him is huge. He is not one of the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks right now, but he is easily top 10. He offers you tons of production, and he's in an easy matchup versus the Lions. Stafford, in my opinion, is a must start. Another guy you got to start is Darrell Henderson. The volume is sort of there, sort of not. He is certainly not the most effective running back in the league. He's not McCaffrey or Derrick Henry, but he's got 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games. And despite missing a game, he is 13th in running back scoring. He has been very effective, especially in standard leagues. You need to play Darrell Henderson. In fact, he's good enough that you still need to play him in PPR leagues, though he loses a little bit of value there. Of course, you start Cooper Kupp. He is still the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy scoring right now. Absolutely play him. But you also got to play Robert Woods. He's been inconsistent and didn't start the year so hot, but 3 weeks straight he's finished in the top 36. He is a safe, high-end wide receiver 3 who can definitely finish as a wide receiver 1 given the right weeks. I mean, this is a wide receiver who could still go out and see 10 catches for 100-plus yards and 2 TDs. Again, there's some inconsistency there. You need to be aware of that, but you can't fully predict that, so you have to put him in your lineup and accept that some weeks will be better than others. Play Robert Woods. As far as Tyler Higbee goes, he's a low-end start. Hasn't looked as good as many people expected, but considering how effective they've been rushing into the end zone, right? They haven't been the best running team, but when they get to the goal line, they're scoring touchdowns that way. Cooper Kupp scoring touchdowns. Robert Woods getting a little bit more hot, and he's played better lately. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of room for them to, I guess, really spread the ball out. There's just a lot of mouths to feed, especially for a team that has a fairly good defense. So Tyler Higbee's a good tight end, and in good matchups, he can be a very good start. But for most weeks, you're going to start him and lower your expectations and understand that he will likely, for many weeks, finish in that 8 to 14 range. You got to start their kicker, Matt Gay. He scored at least 8 fantasy points every single game so far this year. And you got to start the Rams defense versus the Lions. Lions give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing defenses, and the Rams are a good defense. Taking a look now at the other side, what about the Lions and Jared Goff? You got to sit this guy. Jared Goff came out week 1, had a pretty good performance. I was kind of excited to see what the Rams could do, and they've been really close in a lot of games. I just talked to somebody about that earlier today. The Lions have been very close against good teams like the Ravens. They are a record-breaking field goal away from, winning that game. So anyways, but the fact of the matter is Jared Goff has struggled recently. In 3 of his last 4 games, he has failed to score a single touchdown. That is brutal. You got to sit Jared Goff. He's just come into a lot of struggle lately. Guess that that head coach there for the Lions, guess he said they're going to make some big changes and that Jared Goff needs to play better, but, we'll see how things go forward. course, DeAndre Swift, here's a phenomenal running back. I would love to see him in a better offense. I truly think he's one of the most talented backs in the league. He leads all running backs in both catches and receiving yards. He's gone back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. In fact, he's got 3 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. He is insane. He is a must-start running back. DeAndre Swift, 100% play that guy. I would actually call him a low-end RB1 in PPR leagues and an RB2 in standard. Now, I'm going to sit all wide receivers. It is a complete mess there. There's some guys that show potential, but when your quarterback has thrown 0 touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 weeks, it doesn't really matter how good you are. It's simply a fact of the matter that they just don't have the passing game right now. In a few weeks, they might turn some things around. It happens. There's some young guys there like Khalif Raymond, who has played pretty good recently, or Amon St. Brown, or if Quintez Cephas were to come off the IR, like there's talent there, there's stuff there, but they haven't been getting the job done, so I'm going to sit all of them. I'm going to start TJ Hawkinson. Finally came back. He struggled for a few weeks, but he was fine last week. 8 catches, 74 yards. He is a PPR stud. In standard leagues, he has lowered value, but you should probably start him anyways, unless you have a stud tight end like a Schultz or a Knox or a Kelsey or someone else, in which case you probably don't have TJ Hawkinson. Finally, I'm going to sit their kicker, Austin Seibert, and I'm going to sit the Lions defense. All right, next up, let's get into the Texans at the Cardinals. I want to talk about the Cardinals first. I don't know what it is. I think I just like to talk about whatever team has more fantasy value first. And of course, in this situation, it's definitely the Cardinals. Kyler Murray is a must start. He is one of, and I'm going to say it, I think he's probably the best quarterback in the league right now. He has played lights out. He is insane. He's 4th in fantasy quarterback scoring. He is making washed up receiver like AJ Green look phenomenal. He is just getting the job done no matter how. And I believe they're still undefeated, still going to be playing this. So anyways, got to start Kyler Murray. That's obvious. You knew that. Here's the interesting thing with the running backs is Chase Edmonds and James Conner. You need to start James Conner. Chase Edmonds came into the year, and a lot of people expected him to be the starter. Me and Rob said that, by the end of the season, it would likely be a lot more James Conner than Edmonds. Sure enough, so far, at least as of right now, we've been right about that. Of the last 2 weeks, James Conner is out carrying Edmonds 26 touches to 10. In fact, Conner has 5 touchdowns in the last 4 games, and the Texans give up the 8th most fantasy points to running backs. James Conner is a must start, but I would sit Edmonds as he's just not getting the volume. He's really taken a backseat recently. Moving on to the wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins is a must start, 6 touchdowns in 6 games. Some people have been a little disappointed in how he's performed recently, but you know what? He's been fine. I think you get your expectations a little high. At some point, he's not going to have 120 catches every single year. He's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. He's going to get the touchdowns. Definitely play Hopkins. Now, as far as the other wide receivers go, here's the interesting thing. Christian Kirk and AJ Green, in my mind, are both what I would call wide receiver 3s. AJ Green is a little more touchdown dependent, and Christian Kirk is certainly more valuable than Green. I would call Green a low-end receiver 3, while Kirk is a high-end receiver 3. They both have some inconsistency. I've talked about this with players in the past. I know we get nervous with these guys, and you have the question of I can't play him every week. Okay, but if you can't predict what weeks are going to be good and can't predict what weeks are going to be bad, just take the fact that there's going to be some weeks where they're going to win games for you by being so dominant. Or trade them if they really make you that nervous. But I'm going to call them both receivers you can start. It's kind of crazy to me. It is a little strange to say that you can feel like we're trusting this whole offense here. I do understand that there has to be a man out. But we're also talking about the heart of the season right now. We have 6 teams on bye weeks. We have injuries. We have offenses that aren't producing. We have got a lot of things going on. So stick with the good receivers who have a good quarterback. They've been productive. Of course, Zach Ertz is out there. Ertz is he kind of started this year as a bust, but he has had top 12 finishes in weekly scoring 3 of the last 4 weeks. I'm really excited to see what he can do with the Cardinals. You need to at least own him. You should have picked him up in your league. You don't have to start him this week, but I think he's going to have a good week, and I wouldn't be surprised if we come away from this week, heading into next week, and we're calling him a must-start tight end. You got to start Matt Prater, and you got to start the Cardinals defense versus the Texans. That Texans offense is giving up the fourth most fantasy points to opposing defenses all around. Should be a pretty Cardinals heavy matchup. They really are the best team in football right now. Certainly some really good teams out there like the Bills, but even a team as good as the Bills, man, we saw what the Titans did to them. There's been some real, not just dominance, but even some consistency from that Cardinals team. Let's talk about the Texans now. Davis Mills, you got to sit him. Cards give up 10th fewest fantasy points to QBs. And Davis Mills has struggled in 2 of the last 3 games. He didn't score. His touchdown to interception ratio is 3 touchdowns to 6 picks in his last 3 games. It's just not productive enough. Sit Davis Mills. And part of that is the offense. Part of that's not necessarily him, but it doesn't really matter what the reason is. Fantasy value isn't there. Now, Mark Ingram, you can start him. He's getting volume. He's a back who's going to get you 16 to 20 touches. So for that reason, you should start him. Again, I'm not super happy about it. I always make sure to draft better running backs. Like for me, every year, I go into the year and I've got like James Robinson in the league, as well as David Montgomery and Antonio Gibson and a lot of guys. Now, I've been cursed by injuries in that league, but hopefully you went into your draft and you got better talent than Mark Ingram. But if you say have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's now on the IR, and you're needing to replace him, Ingram is more than doable, especially when you consider how many teams are out this week and everything that's going on there. As far as the wide receivers go, start Brandon Cooks as a high-end wide receiver 2 and sit all other Texans receivers. I'm also going to sit their tight end. I'll sit their kicker, Kaimi Fairbairn, and I'm going to sit the Texans defense to wrap that one up nice and simple. All right, so let's get into the Colts at the 49ers right now. Maybe not the most exciting game, but there's definitely fantasy value to be had here. And, to be honest, I'm kind of excited to watch it. But anyways, let's start talking about the Colts first and Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz is a quarterback you should consider starting this week. He's not so good that he's a must start, but there's value there. The 49ers give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. And again, they even did that too, because they've been, played some good quarterbacks for sure. But they even gave up 3 touchdowns to Jared Goff. It just tells us they're just not a good pass defense right now. And Carson Wentz and that Colts offense has made serious improvements over the last few weeks. They've begun to figure out their running game, and they're using their weapons better. Hilton coming back has helped. Pittman's developing. Mawali Cox has been, definitely carving out a role there, especially in the red zone. So I would play Carson Wentz this week unless you have a good or a better option than him. You also got to play Jonathan Taylor. 5 touchdowns in 3 games, easily over 100 yards in all 3 of those matchups. He is just, I don't know what happened, but a switch has been flipped. He has been fine. Definitely start Jonathan Taylor this week. In fact, I expect he'll probably be somewhere in that RB1 range. Now, as far as the wide receivers go, there's not a ton of value there. You can start T.Y. Hilton and Michael Pittman as of right now. The thing that does help them is that Paris Campbell went on the IR. He did have a big 50-yard touchdown last week. That's going to go away. His role is going to go away a little bit. So there's going to be some value there. I don't know how much you can trust them. I would say that you should really expect both of them to be low-end wide receiver 3s. In fact, you might be able to look on your waiver wire and find some better options. So keep your eye open and, be attentive for that. But I would sit them. Oh, and by the way, I missed it. I would also sit Naheem Hines. Just too low usage at the moment. So definitely avoid playing him, just not getting a lot of usage. You can start Mawali Cox. He scored in 3 of the last 4 games. He is not a PPR play. He is a standard league play, however. You can start their kicker, Michael Badgley, and start the Colts defense. They should have a good matchup this week. Now, onto the 49ers side of the football, Trey Lance is out. That means Jimmy Garoppolo is in. And while this probably means the 49ers as a whole are going to be worse, this does mean more consistent and understandable fantasy value for the other players in that offense, like the running game. You can play Eli Mitchell this week. I would start him as a low-end RB2 or flex play. He's got huge upside, but we don't have a big sample size of his performances to know exactly what he's going to look like. That being said, Jimmy Garoppolo means better and more running. When Trey Lance was out there, he was getting like 15 to 18 carries as the quarterback. That was taking away from the running backs. Jimmy Garoppolo will not be doing that, and so this is going to mean huge boost in value for Eli Mitchell. Do not be surprised if he sees 20-plus touches in this game. Of course, you need to play Deebo Samuel. Despite having a bye week already, he is 7th in fantasy scoring amongst receivers. He has been lights out. Kittle is on the IR, so obviously don't start him. I would also sit Joey Sly and the 49ers defense. Next, let's get into the Eagles at the Raiders. Now, we're getting into the games that Connor left notes for me for. So again, thank you, Connor. That being said, it's going to be a little difficult for me trying to read them and go back and forth. So if I sound like an idiot, it's because I am an idiot, but also because I'm just a little more comfortable with my own note taking, as I've got a very obsessive compulsive organizational system. But let's start off with it. What about the Eagles? Jalen Hurts, he is a must-start guy. He's a top 10 quarterback every single week. He has been phenomenally productive. In fact, he hasn't had a week of less than 20 fantasy points. He's been 20.5 fantasy points or more every single game. Part of that is the mobility there. He's getting 7 or more carries every single game. He is getting that extra volume. That is super, super valuable to his production. I don't know what it is, but I think it keeps defenses on their toes, and it is a key part to who he is. As long as his legs are healthy and he can still run, he's going to be all right. They've also really developed some weapons in that offense. Going to the running backs now, because of the brutal bye weeks and everything that's happening, because of the injuries and all the stuff going on, you can play Miles Sanders. And I know that's crazy, but I think you should probably consider starting him this week unless you happen to have 2 other good running backs. Even in a flex league, you probably would want to put him in your flex. Kenneth Gainwell is a sit. Gainwell had just 1 touch last week. As confusing as that was, Gainwell was really starting to take over that role. Boom, he disappeared last week, and Miles Sanders was the guy. He's averaging 4.7 yards per carry, so he's not been terribly unproductive, but he also not seeing a ton of volume or goal line touches. And when he was out there in the fourth quarter against the Bucs, those were the most effective drives that they had as an Eagles offense. So you can play Miles Sanders. Don't expect him to be an RB1 for you, but you can play him. As far as the wide receivers go, Devonta Smith is a guy that you should play. It was a tough matchup week for him, but he has been very productive. I think that you should start him and sit all other Eagles receivers. Dallas Goedert is now a must start. They finally got rid of Zach Ertz, and that is huge for his volume. It will mean that he is going to see an extra target or 2 every single game, and it does mean they have more faith in him. So that's huge. Play Dallas Goedert this week. As far as the defense goes, sit the Eagles defense this week, and I would start their kicker. Moving on to the other side, what about the Raiders there? Derek Carr. Here's the thing. Derek Carr has been really fun to watch this year. He's been really great. And to be quite honest, I was really surprised with how they played in their first game after losing their coach. He's currently 13th in fantasy points. He's had 4 top 12 finishes. He's been very productive. This will be a tough matchup for him. So you can start him, but you don't have to. I would put him in the 8 to 14 range. So, in a smaller league, sit him. In a larger league, start him. But I guess we'll see how it goes. The Eagles have been good against quarterbacks. We've also seen that Derek Carr has been good against good defenses. He was fine against the Chargers, so who knows? If anything, I lean on the start Derek Carr side, but I've kind of liked him all year, and I've been really impressed with how he's performed. So maybe that's just me. That might come down to your own personal opinion. And of course, the options that you have available to you in your league. As far as the running backs goes, a must start is Josh Jacobs. He's a volume running back. He's getting you like 17 and a half touches a game over the last 3 games. That's what he's averaged. As long as he's healthy, he may not be the most efficient back, but he is the back. He is the starter. He is the guy, and he's been fairly effective at finding the end zone, so I would play Josh Jacobs. Now, I would also sit Kenyon Drake. Now, he had a 20-point performance last week, but it's just hard to trust him. He only had 9 touches in his last 3 games. And 2 of those went for touchdowns, but again, there's just the concern there of consistency. When Josh Jacobs is healthy, he's the guy. I'm going to lean away from playing Kenyon Drake this week. But, desperate times call for desperate measures. If you need to put him in there as a low-end flex play and just cross your fingers, you can do that, especially against a good pass defense. They might lean heavier on their running backs. As far as the wide receivers go, there aren't really a whole lot of guys there that I would like right now. I'm going to sit Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards. The guy you got to play is Hunter Renfrow in PPR leagues. I don't trust any of them in standards. There's just too much confusion as to who might find the end zone which week or how much volume they are or aren't going to get. There's a lot going on right now. But Hunter Renfrow at least safe for catches. There's no reason he can't get you 70 catches for 60 yards or more I would play Renfrow and PPR. In standard leagues, I would probably sit all of them, but if you had to start one in standard, I'd still lean Hunter Renfrow's way. Now, as far as the tight ends go, you got to start Darren Waller. I'm not even going to bother wasting my time. Start Darren Waller. It's really that simple and that obvious. I would sit the kicker, Daniel Carlson, and I would sit the Raiders defense. Let's get into the Bears at the Buccaneers now. Let's start off talking about the Bears first. You got to sit Justin Herbert. There was some hype for him this year, but let's be honest, the one thing that he was expected to do well, running the ball, he hasn't even done that well. In fact, he's averaging just 17 rushing yards a game. He is really a bottom 5 start this week. It's going to be a very tough game for him. Sit Justin Fields. Now, hopefully there's some room to development there, but clearly that offense has got to really change some things. As far as the running backs go, it is probably the one bright spot of that offense that has been all right. Their running backs have produced, mostly due to volume. Here's what you need to know. David Montgomery is still out, and Damian Williams, he will not be able to clear the COVID protocol until Saturday at the earliest. So what you need to understand is that if Damian Williams is out, Khalil Herbert becomes a must start. He was very productive in that offense. He had 18 and 19 carries. He's been efficient with those carries. Start Khalil Herbert if Damian Williams is out. If Williams comes back, there then becomes some questions as to whether or not you should play Herbert. Then it has to really come down to, if you don't like your other options or what you've got there. I think Williams will likely be out this week, but either way, I lean towards starting Herbert even if Williams is back. But if Williams is back, you do begin to question that and look at your options. Herbert's been extremely productive, and he is a must play if he's the sole running back in that offense. In fact, me and Rob were just talking about this. He's probably going to challenge David Montgomery for touches when Montgomery is back. As far as the wide receivers go, there's really no one there that's usable. Allen Robinson has been just a bust this year. He has absolutely plummeted. Over the last 5 weeks, he's averaging 3 catches for 40 yards. You've got to have a better option than that. It's not his fault. He's a phenomenal receiver. He's got a terrible quarterback situation. And really the same goes for Mooney, who's, Mooney has performed better than Robinson, but he still hasn't been great. If you have to play Mooney, I guess that you can, but it has to be in PPR leagues. I would still call him a wide receiver 4. For me, both those guys missed the mark. And part of why they missed the mark is that even if they have an okay week, they're not going to have a monster week. So their upside isn't high enough to make up for the downside, right? You're at best getting a wide receiver 3 performance from these guys, and that's just not okay. Go out there, find another guy. I'm going to sit tight end Cole Kmet. I'm going to sit their kicker, and I'll sit the Bears defense. Let's get to the Buccaneers now. Here's a crazy thing. Tom Brady. Start him. He's been nothing but phenomenal. He's in the top 3 in fantasy quarterback scoring this year. There's no way around it. He has been insanely productive. In fact, this season, I think he is, arguably statistically, me and Rob were actually watching one of the Bucs games, and they said this might be statistically one of his best seasons ever, which is crazy. But yeah, definitely play him. Leonard Fournette, what about the running game? Leonard Fournette is a must start. He has been very productive when he's been getting the ball. In fact, he's averaging 22 touches over his last 3 games, 125 yards and a touchdown. Now he goes up against the Bears. Bears are not the worst defense in the league, but they're not formidable. They're going to lean heavily on their run and continue to use Fournette as a volume option. As far as the wide receivers go, you got a lot of guys there. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown. Now, here's what you need to know. As always, the issue has remained the same, that there's a little bit too many weapons there. But Antonio Brown will be out this week. You need to understand that because he is out, that changes the value of those guys. Evans and Godwin become must starts. They become high-end wide receiver 2s. That is huge. Gronk is also out. That means O.J. Howard, who was actually active last week. He had 6 catches on 7 targets. So I would not start any of those tight ends, but those tight ends have been pretty good filling in for Gronk. They continue to add a little bit of value to Tom Brady. Funny thing is, Brady lost his receiver. He lost his tight end. He's still fine. He's got good backup tight ends. He's still got 2 stud receivers. So I would play both of those wide receivers there. I would start their kicker, and I would start their defense. Their defense should have an absolute field day versus the Bears this week. Finally, let's talk about one more game, and that's Saints at the Seahawks. We'll start off with the Saints and Jameis Winston. Now, he's quietly having a very good year. A quarterback rating of 108 and a 12-3 touchdown interception ratio, and he doesn't even have his best receiver, Michael Thomas. He's been pretty good. Now, Michael Thomas will not be returning quite yet for this Monday night matchup, but in a couple of weeks, a healthy and back Michael Thomas will mean big things for this offense. I'd actually start him this week in the range of 10 to 14 amongst quarterbacks. He's not going to have a phenomenal day, and there's a ton of risk there, but it's a great matchup. The Seahawks are a below-average defense, and they've proven that teams who know what they're doing can move a ball against them. Oh, yeah, and the Saints are coming off a bye week, which gave them extra time to prepare for this matchup. I like Winston this week. If you're looking for an option in deep leagues, definitely play him. As far as the running backs go, I'm not even going to get into it. There's no need to convince you. There's no conversation to be had. Start Alvin Kamara. As far as the wide receivers go, there's no one there that I love. Marquez Galloway and Deontay Harris are really the guys. Harris is a big playmaker, and Callaway seems to be a little bit more on the volume side. I don't trust either of those guys, but I think in this particular matchup, you can start them both. Understand that their floor is a wide receiver 5. They can have awful weeks, but both of them could have huge weeks. I would probably start Callaway over Harris, as he is really, I think he's got much more upside there. But we'll see exactly how this game is going to match up. It's like I said, and this is one of those things where you want to figure out your roster. There's value there, yes, but there's also big bust potential, and there's one of those situations where I know the upside's there, but I don't know if the risk is necessarily worth it. And there might be some other players who also have risk, but are a little bit safer. That being said, and I've said it already, that Seahawks defense, they're not formidable in the passing game. They are vulnerable, and I think both those guys could have a good performance this week. I would sit both tight ends there, Adam Troutman and Juwan Johnson. I'm going to sit their kicker, and I'm going to start the Saints defense. They're a top defense going up against Geno Smith. That's going to be a good game for the Saints D, so I would definitely start them. Flipping sides, let's talk about these Seahawks. What about Geno Smith? Well, again, I just said it. He's going against the Saints. They give up the second fewest fantasy points to QBs. They have been very effective. Definitely sit Geno Smith this week. As far as the running backs go, Alex Collins can be played as long as he is the only running back in that offense. That's really what you need to know. It depends on volume. So if he is the only back in the backfield, yeah, he can be played. The volume there will mean fantasy numbers, but without that volume, without him being the only guy there, I don't think that you should play him. So that's really the only thing that you need to know. They're pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Not a great running back, but really any running back as the sole starter is worth a start. Of course, you got to start DK Metcalf. He is nothing but phenomenal. He's a guy who's going to get you 7 to 10 targets. Geno Smith is going to lean on him as a safety blanket. What about Tyler Lockett? Now, I'm actually just, again, reading these notes from Connor. He says to sit, and here's what he wrote. Said, since he was the wide receiver 1 through the first couple of weeks, he has since had 15 catches for 148 yards in the last 4 weeks, and he is too big of a boom or bust. Most importantly, he wrote that Smith just can't support his big plays and doesn't do a good job with the deep ball, and I love the analysis there. Really solid breakdown. With Russell Wilson in, Wilson can throw the 50 and 60-yard deep bombs, and that will mean Tyler Lockett is a must-play. But Tyler Lockett with Geno Smith is a different thing. I would also agree that you should consider sitting Lockett this week. That being said, it's still Tyler Lockett, and don't replace him with garbage. If you're in a 16-team league, probably just call it okay and put him in your lineup even though you don't love him. Finally, I would sit the tight ends Everett and Disley. I would start their kicker and sit the Seahawks defense. Do not play the Seahawks defense this week is what he wrote. In fact, he put the word please, so if you do, you're probably going to hurt his feelings. All right, guys, that's the breakdown. Nice and simple, just a couple of games. Like I said, life has been just chaotic right now. Everything seems to be insane, but we're getting by. It's just a little bit of a crazy week. Next week, we will be back at it with more videos. Hopefully, of course, Sunday, we'll be doing our waiver wire. We'll get back on the start sit, and hopefully, Connor will be joining us for a power rankings video. That's something that I have wanted to do for many weeks now, so if we can get around to it, I'm going to be super excited. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. You have a great day, and God bless.